So you read this article for today, Federalists and Anti-Federalists. You should have read it and annotated, underlined, circled, put notes in the margins, highlighted, whatever you thought was important or things that you had questions about, just like your English teachers have taught you for years. I am going to review the information in this document with you right now. I put together a slideshow with some pictures and things like that to summarize the main ideas, not only to review what we've learned already, but then maybe some new ideas that were in this article. You could have this open in a split screen if you want to, but everything that I really want you to know will be in this slideshow. So Federalists versus Anti-Federalists. This is the Constitution Battle Royale. There was a problem. This is review. The Articles of Confederation, which was the first form of government for our country that was established even before the Revolutionary War ended, created a very weak central government with very little power. That was on purpose. It was not a mistake. The Americans did not want to live under an authoritative government like they had under the British rule, so they went to the other end of the spectrum and created a really weak government. It turned out to be a problem, though, because the central government could not do things like enforce state laws or tax people, which was an issue because then they had no money to run a military or anything. So they're going to have to solve this problem. By the way, when you see the term central government, it is the same thing as a federal government in our country. We can use those terms interchangeably, and sometimes you'll see me and other people do that. So they mean the same thing. Think of the federal government as the government that we have in Washington, D.C., like President Trump, the Congress, the Supreme Court, like that's all federal level government. It's also called central government because it's the center of our system. It's what holds us all together. So what is the solution? Representatives from 12 of the 13 states gathered to revise the Articles of Confederation, but when they were discussing this, they decided it was too far gone, it was too damaged to revise. They just threw it out and started over. They ended up writing what we call the Constitution. This happened in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1787. It took place in the building that you see here, which we now call Independence Hall. It also happens to be the place where they had written and signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776. So that's a really historic place. In the negotiations of how the Constitution should look, two groups are going to emerge. You have the Federalists, who want a strong federal government. They support the Constitution. They think this is a great idea. And once it is drafted, they are satisfied with how it turned out. They like the fact that there are three branches of government that spread the power out, and they feel like that's enough. They should just sign it, ratify it, move on with life. But you have this group called the Anti-Federalists that are obviously against it. That's what anti means. They fear a strong federal government. They're afraid that we're going to go right back to the way things were under British rule. They prefer stronger state governments. They're worried that the Constitution is giving too much power to the federal government. So the Constitution concerns these people. And there are, these people are at the Constitutional Convention. They're arguing back and forth with the other people that are there who say, oh, it's good enough, let's just move on. But they put their foot down and say, absolutely not. The states aren't going to ratify this if we don't make a change. And I want to ask at this point, do you notice the beginning of a trend here? A group who wants a stronger federal government, a group that thinks that a strong central government is what glues us all together, and it guides us, and it polices us, and it will run things more efficiently, as opposed to a group who says, no, the power should be at the local level, and the federal government should be as small as possible and should stay out of our lives as much as possible. You do see the beginning of this trend, and of course today we call them Democrats and Republicans. So the names have changed, but some of the ideas have not changed at all. We are still having these discussions and debates today, which is good. You always want to have debates. You always want to have discussions and conversations about these things so that we work it out and figure out what is best for us. You want to hear both sides, right? Anyway, the Federalists are led by people like Alexander Hamilton, for example, and that's a picture of him there on the left. He, along with a couple other founding fathers named John Jay and James Madison, wrote essays that they call the Federalist Papers. They were published and circulated among the states to preach their support for the Constitution. It was propaganda for the Constitution. These guys are like cheerleaders for the Constitution. They're trying to drum up support all around the states because ultimately the states have to ratify the Constitution. They have to approve it. Just because representatives from 12 of the 13 states gathered and said it was a good idea doesn't mean it will become the law of the land. It has to go out to the states and the people have to vote on it. So they write these essays that become very influential in American history because obviously it does convince a lot of people to adopt the Constitution. So they're saying, let's just do this. The Anti-Federalists are arguing, we're not doing it unless you add a Bill of Rights. It's that simple. We want to make sure that the federal government's power is limited, and we want to make sure that our individual rights are protected. We don't want to end up in a situation like we were with the British. We want to make sure that we have trial by jury, that police need to have a search warrant to search my property, that my free speech is protected, that I have freedom of religion, that I am allowed to own a firearm to protect myself. These are the things that the Anti-Federalists were fighting for. And they got it. They got what they wanted. The Federalists got what they wanted. The Anti-Federalists got what they wanted. We have a deal. The Constitution remains as written. They just added the Bill of Rights at the end, which was the first 10 amendments to the Constitution to protect our individual freedoms. And of course, the rest is history. We've been using it ever since.